Good morning, everyone. I'm Julie from the New Lighter Life, and today I'm going to share with you a quick process that I did to can my green beans. If you watched any of my videos, you know I planted a lot of green beans, and I feel like I'm finally getting ahead of it, and we're not just picking beans every day. But I did have 4 quarts of green beans to can this week, and so let me show you that process, which is very simple. All right, so here I am with the beans that I've gathered through the week. I generally go out at night and I'll pick the beans that I have, and then I'll put them in a Ziploc bag and store them in my refrigerator until I have enough to run a batch through my canner. So while I was doing this, I thought, well, I should go out and see what I have in my garden and see if there's any more that need to be picked that I can can in this batch. And I found some more. So I went ahead and I cleaned those, I rinsed them off, and I ran out of steam that night. And so I just went to bed for the evening, and the next morning I got up and I snapped the beans. Ideally, you would clean the ends off and snap them the same day because they do start to dry out a little bit. So I did this as quick as I could the next day and got them all ready to go into my jars. You definitely don't want to wait a long time with your ends cut off. And now I'm just putting the beans into the jars. I prefer to do wide mouth jars for my green beans, and I actually prefer pint size, but with everybody being out of canning jars, I am forced to use quart size, and so we will have big bean meals when we have these for our family. And so once you fill them, you want to have a 1-inch head space between the top of the jar and the top of your beans, and that's roughly where I have them. Now, the next step is adding salt to your jars, which is completely optional. It's really a preference as far as taste, but for each quart jar, I do a table or a teaspoon of Himalayan sea salt. And on my stove at this point, I have some water boiling, and I do a raw pack for my green beans. So they're not heated up, they're raw. My funnel's a little small, but it still does work. And you just pour your boiling water into your jars, and you'll see I kind of get a little messy here, but it still works. You pour that boiling water in there, and all the salt obviously goes in there. One thing that's important is once you put your water in your jar, that you take some kind of either like a butter knife, or I've seen people use chopsticks or skewers, and you want to put that into your jar and move your beans around some so you can get rid of any air bubbles that maybe are caught in there, and that'll get everything to settle the right way. So you can check to make sure you have that proper headspace. All right, the next step is that you would wipe your rim of your jar with a wet paper towel that is clean. Just want to get rid of any residue, anything that might prevent a proper seal. And I have heated up my Tatler reusable lids, and these have a rubber gasket and the plastic top, and those are already put together, and they're heated up on the stove, and then you'll place them on your clean jar rims, and then you will finger tighten the ring onto the jar. Do not over tighten it. It's really important you don't do that, because if you do, you'll actually break your jars when they're in the canning process. They have to have some space to be able to seep and to release some of the pressure. So my canner has already been heated on the stove for a little bit, and I'm adding my jars to my canner, making sure that when you grab those jars with the jar grabber, I'm not sure what it's called, but you want to grab on the glass and not on the rim. And then you'll go ahead and you'll put your canner on the lid on the top. Now you'll see on the back it's called a petcock, and that is what actually seals the canner so that the pressure can build. And so I'm going to pause it right here, and you can see in the back there is that line of steam. You want that to be a constant, steady steam coming out of the back where the petcock was before you put on the petcock again. It needs to be doing a steady steam for about 5 to 10 minutes. Once that is achieved, then you'll go ahead and put the petcock back on, and you will allow your pressure to build up to the proper pressure of where your altitude is and what you're canning, and then you'll set your timer. Once it gets to that right pressure amount on the gauge that you see in the front. So that's pretty simple. You just follow those directions. From our area, it's 25 minutes for us to have a quart of green beans in the canner at 12 pounds of pressure. So just make sure you're following the proper canning amounts and the time and pressure amount and everything, just to be safe. All right, so that's what I did to can my green beans. It was really simple. I did want to just talk to you really quickly about the canner. This canner was my grandma's. It was from the 1940s. I just recently got it from her, and I had to replace some really important parts on it. So let me just show you a quick picture of what this looked like before. So you can see in the picture that the pressure gauge was brown. I don't believe it would have actually worked. I don't know. There was also underneath a bottom seal, and this was dry rotted. It was cracked and it just wasn't functioning properly anymore. It wouldn't have sealed. And then there's a overpressure valve in the center, which is a safety valve. And on the back, there's a petcock is what it's called, and that's what you put on the canner to get the right pressure. What I would like to do is I would like to add a pressure regulator, a weighted one, instead of using the petcock, which just closes it all. The pressure regulator, the weighted one, you can use it in combination and it will release the pressure, so I don't have to babysit this so much. It's really not complicated, but for quart jars, it's 25 pounds or 25 minutes of watching to make sure we're staying in a safe range. I don't want my pressure valve to release. I don't want the safety valve to release. It has happened to me before. I don't want to get too much into it right now because I will talk about it in another video, how to rehab it, and just I'm going to give it a facelift anyway. And so when I get in there, if you want to hear what happened, it was pretty messy. I'll just say that. So you want to make sure you do everything properly. And just another quick thing before I move on to just talking about the beans, I want to give a little more information. But once I replaced all these parts in my grandma's canner, I took it to Ace Hardware and they tested the regulator to make sure everything was safe and good. And he said it was on the dot. So I felt pretty safe canning with this, and I've done it probably about, maybe I've run about 7 batches through here. So that's it for my canner. I want to encourage you guys, if you see canners in thrift stores, garage sales, auctions, wherever you may see, maybe they're family heirlooms and you've had them, vintage old ones, you can replace those parts. If you need information about replacing parts, old owner's manuals, the best place I found to get information is pickyourown.com. And what I did was I found my canner, now mine. I'm going to stop calling it my grandma's, but it's my grandma's canner. I found her manual, or the manual for this specific canner there, and there's some important information in there. That's, where I found the 7 to 10 minutes of steady steam. I found, you have to put 2 quarts of water in here. There's some really important things you just need to know, and I think they have every manual for every canner that's ever been made. So if you check out pickyourown.com, it's a great website. I've used it for years, so I wanted to share that with you. And so really quick, I want to just talk to you about taking your jars out of the canner, because I didn't show that part of the process. It was getting late. I had my daughter's American Heritage Girls meeting was last night, so I needed to go for that. I didn't show that, but let me just show you real quick a couple little tips on this. So when you have your jar in the canner, you're going to have your ring on there, of course. And whenever you're messing with these and taking them in and out, you don't want to touch the ring. You just want to put your ring, jar grabber, you want to put it on the edge. So once you do that, you're going to take it out, and when it's warm enough, or cool enough, I should say, to touch, you're going to want to tighten that up, that lid, because for these rings, there has to be air escaping, but when they're sealing, after they've been processed in the pressure canner, you want to tighten them down. And then they're going to cool all the way to room temperature, completely cool. And then you're going to take your ring off. And this is very important that you do. You don't want to store your jars with rings on, because you won't be able to tell if the seal is good. These can rust. Sometimes there's seepage that affects your rings, so you just want to take those off. And then you're going to test them. You're going to test each one of your jars, and you're just going to hold the rubber part up, and you're going to lift it and see if they come off. If they don't come off, you are good to go. So these have all been tested. They all worked. My 4 worked. So I wanted to share that little bit of information with you. because like I said, I didn't cover in the video, but hopefully this was helpful for you. Hopefully it took out any intimidation for pressure canning, and I will cover redoing the canner, an old vintage canner, but hopefully you can give some new life to your old canner and you can enjoy using it and it being a functional part of your life. So thank you guys. Thanks for joining me. I appreciate it. Bye.